And we are live. Welcome everybody to another episode of the FreudenFreude podcast, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader.
Hi, I'm Sandra Corona.
And I am Claudia.
And we are coaches.
We are coaches.
Yes, and I'm a coach for leaders, for young professionals and neurodiverse community.
Oh, there you go. And I'm the coach you call if you as a leader or your team have some trouble and stuff is keeping you up at night. So that's it. Today we have a very interesting topic, and it's in our intercultural intelligence series. And today we're going to talk about collectivism versus individualism. So a little bit about why we chose this topic, and I'll let you chime in just a second, Sandra, is because there's a number of what are commonly called cultural dimensions through which you can look at a person or a situation in order to try to maybe get a better handle on where what you're looking at is situated culturally. So we had already talked about power distance. There's many others that we're going to look at over the next few months. And individualism and collectivism are one of the lenses through which you look at this. I want to say from the very beginning that one is not a label. One is not, oh, you're this or you're that, but it's rather a spectrum. And sometimes the same person, the same situation, the same thinking can fluctuate on that spectrum. But it is going to give you a little bit better understanding maybe where the person or the behavior is coming from. And so always, we are not trying to label people. We are trying to look at vocabulary and lenses through which you can look at something to maybe get a better sense on that one aspect, just one aspect of culture.
Right. And also keep in mind that you can be brought up in a collective, but then also be living in an individualistic society. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, there are countries that have a combination of both, like the Nordic countries. So we're going to explore a little bit as to how that works out and why is it important to have sometimes a little bit of both.
Right. And so also here, there's no good or bad in this. It is just what it is. We are not here to judge. We're not saying you should be one or you oughtn't be the other. It's literally okay wherever you are. I think when we apply these things as we try to understand what's happening around us, it helps us to fundamentally maybe get more tolerance ultimately about where people are coming from. And so it broadens our horizon as to the possibilities, and then maybe even releases a little bit the grip our own culture has on us as we explore these options. So maybe we can actually give kind of in a nutshell overview what these things really are. And so I think in a nutshell for me, individualism versus collectivism is the degree to which your personal identity and therefore your choices, your behavior, the way you integrate into society, etc., is defined either by a group or collective, or by your own personal, like me above else kind of attitude. Literally, collectivism is the priority is on the collective, culture group, society, family, whatever the collective is, versus individualism being all about you, the
Mhm.
individual. And this is not only for the individual, but this is for a society at large, and the cultural norms kind of that exist in a culture. In
Mhm.
certain cultures, being the individualist, self-made, eccentric go-getter, that kind of dances to his or her own tune and is out there doing their own thing based on their own conviction, can be very much tolerated and sometimes even encouraged. Versus
Mhm.
in other cultures, this would be a very big no-no, and would get you stigmatized very, very quickly,
Mm.
because it's all about the harmony of the whole, and kind of maintaining this identity of the collective. Weirdly enough,
Mhm.
the identity
Mhm.
is about the collective. So, what's your take on it, Sandra?
So for me, if I think about a collective, I think about bees and I think about ants. Okay. I think how a collective is a group of individuals, in this case, or animals, that think together, that act together for a common purpose. And if you were to be in that collective, it becomes part of you. I mean, it's a contagious, uh, it's a contagious, how can I say it, society, or cultural aspect. But in general, what we're trying to say here is that sometimes you can also, as part of Global Disc, if you have ever tried Global Disc, or if you want to try Global Disc, reach out to us and we can give you, an example of what Global Disc is. But what Global Disc explains is that you can be coming from a collective, a generational collective, but then you yourself can be an individualistic person. And so even if you are part of a hive, even if you're part of a collective, you can be an individual yourself. But like Claudia says, it depends on where you are living or where you're coming from, that you're going to adapt. And then if you were to move to another country, you could actually find yourself more in tune with that society or with that culture, with that country, because you think like them, even if you're coming from a collective.
Right.
So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now, the individual, the harmony is not in the collective or in the hive. The harmony is within themselves. It's about what they can achieve. It's about individual little wins. It's about celebrating themselves, not as a collective of what you've achieved. It's about, hey, I did it, I was able to achieve this. And so it's about, it is a democratic society, but it is still a little bit of wealth. There is the understanding that wealth is of those who have the opportunity, or of those who find the opportunity, whereas the collective, it's about sharing, right? It's about uh, owning businesses as a collective. So we're entering a little thing that I don't like to talk about too much, which is economy and politics, but we'll touch about that subject in a while
Right.
too.
We don't need to go actually into those particular aspects, or like results of it, let's say. But you brought up a very interesting point that should be underlined again. Collectivism and individualism, I think, are cultural dimensions. So let's think about it as our culture, and we all exist in our soup of culture, if you wish,
Mhm.
but we are always individuals, and we are used to certain things, we are expected to do certain things, but besides that, we are always our own individual with our own
Right.
preferences. And so I think fundamentally, we are always kind of individualistic because we like to live
Yes.
life. But how that actually it then gets put into practice in this soup that we swim in, which is called culture, that can take different ways. I mean, that can take different forms. And sometimes actually this dichotomy between, an individualistic personal preference, for instance, living in a collective society can be quite challenging for certain people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it just doesn't click. It's always kind of this foreign way of doing it, like shoes that don't quite fit, right? You have to walk in them, but it's never really comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
so, again, the challenge is real. But again, this is just one of the things that a culture that we're in is more or less. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it would be helpful if you think now is the time to maybe talk about some examples of this how this actually comes about. Before
Mm.
go into like politics or economics or things like
Yeah.
that. Let's just see like family.
Right.
Does it matter in the family? For instance, um, in individualism, the family is often very nuclear. It's mom and dad, and the kids. It's just this really small nucleus of family.
Mm-hmm.
Versus in collectivism, it's very, very often that it is the extended family and the grandmothers and the uncles and all the cousins, and maybe they all live relatively close together so that they can share in child rearing and take care of the old and sick. And it's just a completely different thing. And in many collectivist countries it would never occur to the children to move far away from the parents, even when they're adults. Often, even as young adults, or even maybe young newlyweds, they still live in the husband's family house, for instance, right? And it's kind of this extended family. So you can imagine, if you even if you don't live in the same house, but if you're kind of this unit, then there is this strong sense of interdependence, right? Because
Mm.
just as much as they depend on you to do your share, you can kind of sit rest assured that they're going to do their share. As you take care of a child or maybe an elderly person in your family, you know that if you have children, they're going to have somebody to take care of them. And as you grow older, you have two. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of this thing. So of course, then if you look at decisions that you make, those you will get input from the extended family. You will not really be able to
Yeah.
avoid it. And very often, actually, it turns out that, the parents have to really agree who you marry or who you date or who you date or who you marry. It's not just like, I'm so in love, of course I'm going to get married to that person. And, my parents just have to deal with it. It just becomes this microcosm of interdependence and joint decision making. Because if you bring in, somebody who does not really fit or is not approved of by your family, then it is going to disrupt this unit,
Mm-hmm.
going to bring
Mm-hmm.
in energy or relationship trouble, outside of just you and your spouse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's, for instance, just one example.
Well, you're saying something very important. One of the things that we have to remember is that the problems that exist in a community is that when how you want to behave versus how you should behave clash, right? And that's when families, when society, when politics, when all of these aspects, even in a company, I mean, not even in a company, this is one of the biggest reasons as to why there are differences, that people clash, because there are micro societies as well, right? There's the micro community, sense of community, collectivist business spaces, and then there's the individualistic business space. And so we have to just understand how to behave, like Claudia was saying. If you don't behave according to the collective or the individualistic society, you're just not going to fit in, and it's going to be really hard for you to be a part of that community.
Actually, if I can just interject here, it just occurred to me that in my work as a team coach, very often the challenge that I have is that I come into this team of these brilliant people, because I tell you, companies do an excellent job in recruiting really, bright talent. But a lot of what made these people so special and such high achievers is their focus on self and their individual
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
traits. And now we bring
Correct.
people together into a team. And ultimately, then we tell them, well, there's no I in team. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of opening up this collection of individualists to a micro collectivist space, right? Because as
Mm-hmm.
we come together as a team, as we build this team dynamic, that in its
Yeah.
very self is kind of this a collectivist concept. Because what we
Right.
want to do is we want to see how can we contribute to the greater good of the team. How can we make the team shine, even if that doesn't mean that my voice is not loudest? Meaning,
Mm-hmm.
how can we come together to make this overarching collectivist thing work? And very often it is quite challenging, right? And
Yes.
but maybe that also is a different way, maybe for some of the leaders that are listening to this, to maybe see why this is maybe something worthwhile exploring, this whole concept.
Right. And if we think about what is how certain societies or cultures can experience both, like the best of both worlds, let's think about the healthcare system, right? There's certain countries that have adapted the free care system, but yet their society is individualistic. And let's think about the UK, right? The UK, their healthcare system is free, right? And that is a liberal, collective type of thought. But the society itself is individualistic. But also, what other way can it be manifested in a society of individualistics? Let's think about the community watch, right? Let's think about celebrations, about holidays, about traditions. Those also bring people together. So you might have an individualistic mindset, but you have a collective culture,
Right. And I
right?
think it comes to I think a lot of people get motivated in joining these kind of endeavors when they see that, oh, there's actually strength in numbers. There's actually
Correct.
safety in a group versus,
Correct.
all by my lonesome. And
Yes.
so I think that that also points out again that this is really a spectrum. It's not like 100% this way or 100% that way, but we kind of move around, and we might even move on the spectrum depending on the situation, the context we're in. We might be slightly different in the microcosm of the team at work, for instance,
Hmm.
versus if we're in the family unit, or if we're out on the golf course or whatever, right? So it really depends. I think it's just adding to our cultural intelligence when we know how we are positioning ourselves, and when we recognize and get awareness for where other people are coming from.
Hmm.
Other
Hmm.
people are coming from. Leaders, I think nowadays was very global and distributed teams, with teams even in the office that are composed, from people from international background coming from all over. It's like you might have people in your team that come from a very collectivist background, or a very individualistic background, and you have to kind of get a feel for that and try to maybe then reach out in an appropriate manner to move them to the point on this sliding scale, essentially, where you
Yes.
prefer to where it's even possible in the context to come to an agreement and a consensus. So, because decision making really is, at so much of the core of work, and our everyday life, of course, right? So, in
Hmm.
collectivism, the decisions are often made collectively. Even the decision making process can be very different than just maybe an authoritarian kind of thing, or
Mm.
like something about with maybe less input, because in collectivist decision making, there's often this big reliance on input from family or community, and group consensus is very valued. And
Yes.
people are quite akin to go along with the majority vote. And
Hmm.
if you then have in your team or in your culture group people that just nod because they get to feel that it's the kind of going consensus, without
Mm.
voicing their opinions or maybe valid objections and so on,
Hmm.
you're doing the overall decision making a disservice. You have to say, okay, this might be the consensus right now, but are there other things that we should factor in? Maybe the consensus can change, right? Because if
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
don't position it that way, those people are, if they come from a collectivist a cultural background, they're going to just nod and say, yes, let's do it that way, even if they don't believe
Correct.
it. So where's the
Correct.
buy-in? Where is the voice that you need to hear? Where's the inclusion?
Right.
But on in an individualistic decision-making process, of course, decisions are much more autonomous, right?
Hmm.
I feel like it, I want it, I make choices based on my own preferences and values,
Hmm.
and everybody else just has to deal with it. But it's true, right? I mean, it's true, and and so you see that it's vastly different. It's vastly different.
Yes. Yeah.
For
And
some
I wanted, oh, sorry.
sorry, for some diehard individualists, I mean, life is like, um, after me the deluge, right? I mean, I'm going to do it my way, come hell or high water. Some people really are that strong in their individualism, and that's a very large contrast to somebody who really is part of this collectivist mindset. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, no, sorry. I wanted to just mention really quickly. You were on a flow, so that was really good. I wanted to say, for example, what I have chosen to be my role in today's life is to give out examples, because for me, if I want somebody to see it from the perspective of what it is, I have to think on real life examples, right? So I'm thinking about football, soccer, and American football. I think that, let's remember, like Claudia said at the beginning, we're all individuals, right? And a team is a collective, and that team is managed by a coach. So that group is going to build a mindset based on what the coach's beliefs is. Is it a collective, or is it individualistic, or is it a little bit of both? And then also the coach has to give each one the liberty to be who they want to be, because when you win, when you make a touchdown or when you make a goal, you can see how they celebrate, and you can see when they celebrate whether it's a collective or an individualistic group. I don't know if you've noticed that.
No.
Yeah, well, for example, when you make a touchdown, you can see how when they make the touchdown, they turn around to look for their teammates, and they hug each other, and they throw one against the other, and they celebrate and all this kind of stuff, and everybody's high-fiving and all this kind of stuff. You can see that is a collective mindset, which is we all did it together. But when in soccer, you see that when they make a goal, you see how the guy runs all around the field and his teammates are running after him. Yes. And his teammates are running after him. And he's doing his thing. He's just celebrating, and he's doing all this because he was the goalie, right? So you can see what is the mindset of each single individual. Is that a bad thing? No, absolutely not. It's just how the individual is. But at the end, what was intended and what the player is paid for is to make the goals, right? Some players have it in their heart to be collective, and some players have it in individualistic, but it's also the coach's work to build that, right, around that group, that team, to say, hey, I know that you are being paid to make a touchdown or to make a goal, but at the end, we're all still a team, right?
And I think that it's the big challenge, in any, whether it be group sport, and there's no more brutal group sport than a team at work.
Mm-hmm.
To have this interdependent dynamic going on, which we call team dynamic, right? And because without this, you leave a lot on the table. And there's also, it also even goes into how we communicate. And who, and it's literally about the priorities that are in your head as you do your work or your sport, right? And it's like, will this be good for me? It might be, but then the second question is always, but what about the team? Will the collective group, ultimately larger sense, but does the second, because the immediate thing is always what I want to do for myself. I really think that's inherently the first thing that comes. It's our own preference. It's much more primal in us, about our hunch, our desire about doing things. But for quite a few people, that is just not ever followed by, and what about the others? What about this group, this collective that I'm part of? And so just like the soccer player running alone around the field celebrating his victory, at that moment he just thinks, oh, didn't I do great? And he doesn't think, think, and didn't we all do great, and
Hmm.
support each other? And what about the guy that passed me the ball, and so on? And what about, it just doesn't come together. And maybe it has
Hmm.
also you know, to do with the fact that American football is a very hands-on, lying in a huddle on the floor kind of thing, versus
Yeah.
versus running around the field, not touching each other. So I think that again, there's no right or wrong. It's just kind of different, and that's good example. Good example.
I
But
was also thinking about for those Star Trek lovers, there is a group called the Borg. And the Borg is what they call a collective. Everybody thinks alike. Everybody's um, everybody's everybody has one goal, right? And that is to be stronger, to be um, superior. There's good things about a collective, and then there's this little details that you're like, oh, this is great, but oh, this is the purpose. Oh, okay, we got to think about this one, right? So groups that come together with a single purpose in mind is a good thing. What makes it a little bit dangerous and difficult is, what is the purpose of that collective, right? Of that group. And in this case, I'm going to focus on Star Trek, which is, they want to be a superior race, and they always refer to everybody else as inferior. So what they do is that they assimilate other races that are very smart, that have advanced technology, that have amazing science and all this kind of stuff, so that they can become stronger as a collective. So you see how it's interesting to see how a collective gathers individuals the same as a company, right? So that they can become stronger together.
right,
that's
right.
that's how we're trying to get to that point where we say, yes, we're trying to be a collective, but at the same time, what makes us stronger is our individualism, right? Who we are, what we bring to the table, is what makes us stronger. The problem is when you are still, an individual, even though you're part of this collective. That's what makes it hard. That's what makes it uh you know maybe not last as much as you would want in a company, thinking that they are the problem, versus, oh, maybe we need to look into what's going on and see how we can help you integrate, because maybe there's something that you cannot see because you're coming from a certain mentality. So this is very interesting. I mean, I know that it would depend. You would need to see an example, like a real life example, and experience it, so that you can see and say, oh, I've never realized that I was like this, a collective or individual.
Right. And I think that a lot of it, and the book was an interesting example, because as they were part of this common voice even. They all heard the same
Yep.
messages. They were all hooked into this kind of, I'm looking for the word, they were always truly connected also in thought to
Yes.
the others. And so
Yes.
I think we would be amiss in all this not to talk about the difference between integration and indoctrination. Okay.
Oh.
And I just want to say one sentence about it, and we're going to let it go. This is not a platform to discuss it. But we have seen collectivism and collectivist things go way off the deep end, right? I mean, thinking
Yeah.
about cults, thinking about some times in history where
Yeah.
what was expected in the name of collectivism,
Right.
indoctrination was just not okay. So all of this is not a topic of this thing. It's just, recognizing that sometimes the overarching, doing something for the larger group versus just
Mm-hmm,
doing yourself, that there's a difference, okay?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Everybody is responsible for their own self and for their own decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and so live with care, live with care. And so but a lot of these things already start in childhood, don't they?
Oh yeah.
And and we can already see, maybe also in child rearing, how some of this is. We already touched about maybe in collectivist societies, children growing up much more in a larger family. But I really think it's in collectivist things, very often the mom and the dad do not give free rein to their children as much.
Mm-hmm.
There's children, and we all have known some that where the parents is, you have to find yourself, figure out what you like to do, explore this, explore that. Even for young children, you want to try this, try this, try that, so that they can literally make their own decisions and really hunker down on their own preferences, and then go after it. And whatever not whatever, but in most cases, if it's a healthy endeavor, the parents are going to, to let it go, right? Because the child has found something that they really like, and so on. And in
Yes.
quite many collectivist things, the the decisions about what the child should make need to fit in the existing mold of the collective already, right? So very often the children are then being brought into maybe the same activities as the parents, and they're not going to give these large options about what to explore. And I have had chats with my husband is American of Korean origin, and I have had chats with some of the Korean people that I know about this, and that's exactly how it went. It was much tighter in terms of self-exploration and self-realization growing up. Of course, they were given many opportunities. It's not like they're kept on a really, really tight leash.
Uh-huh.
It's not that a little bit of this everything goes kind of thing, how I have seen it, literally seen it in some American families or something like this.
You know what makes me think is that, speaking of childhood, it's impressive how with time also this kind of collective or individualistic mentality uh, shifts, right? I remember that back in the 80s when I was living in Miami, the idea was collectivism. It was the educational system was a collective. It was about the children. It was about nurturing the child's not only body but mind. It had special programs for children that had, superior education or training. There was help for children that needed to catch up, which is the summer school. They had all of these things, and not only did they have the programs, but it was unquestionable to feed the child, every single child, whether the parent had given money or not. It was like, we're going to feed the child. That's it. And then after school programs, you would still be fed, like you would have dinner basically at school. So, but now with the times, if we think about what Miami is right now, God forbid you do that. It's now an individualistic educational system, where let's look and see what is the benefit for each individual that wants to own a school, right? A private school. Let's make sure that government schools remain governmental, which is, let's just give the basic, and then private schools, well, you get all the benefits, right? You get lunches, breakfast, dinner, and all this kind of stuff. And believe it or not, some of it is funded by the government. So you have the governmental school, the elementary school, and then you have the private school, but both are funded from the government in a way, in some way, shape, or form. And so that's when we say how you have a combination of both individualistic, and collective, but then also collective and individualistic. So it also goes with the times, right? Things changed with time, except, I believe, cultures. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that there has been in some cases this division of maybe something that originally was a collective into different strata. And I think that what plays into that is also just the maybe wealth gap and things like that. All of a sudden, not collective anymore, but it's the haves and the have-nots, and to just have enoughs, So it's really, and then interestingly enough, we have all known this, that once you are in one collective, it's very difficult to get into another. It's very difficult to get into another. So even though, like the collective, this belonging to one group for a common goal, can in itself be a very good thing, because we're all supporting each other. Of course, it relies on everybody carrying certain responsibilities, and there is the sense of loyalty and obligation and things like that. But you stick together, and people give each other a leg up, maybe even in a business referral sense and things like that. But the downfall of that is that, it becomes kind of closed off to everybody else. And if you get shunned, you're out of there. And so, culture groups can be very, very tight. And so again, it always comes to how is this implemented and lived in practice? How does it come across in the real life? And how much are we as individuals fitting into this, either collectivist tendency or a more individualistic tendency? So how okay are we with it? How are we able to adapt? And how can we deal with other people that are different from us? Because two individualists very often recognize each other. You're talking the same language. It's like fist bumps and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But on the other hand, if then, sometimes you have then people from a collectivist society, and they look at you and it's like, how can you even conceive going that route? It just doesn't make sense. It's so out of the norm. Literally, it's so out of the norm, and you expect it. And so then again, if the individualist can say, "Oh, I understand that he thinks that way because he's more collectivist flavored," and he, vice versa, we come to this understanding. And especially if we have to work together and come to a consensus and come to a decision, knowing where we're all from will help us to maybe find some common ground. Rather than saying, "Oh, he's an idiot."
Yeah, yes.
That's just like if we don't recognize, if it doesn't fit into our common sense, very often people are then blaming the person for weird thoughts or just an attitude that just doesn't fit or whatever, just because they're different.
Mhm.
And so I think that being open that the uncommon is actually the norm and that people are fundamentally different one from another, then allows us to just check on one dimension, check, well, is this maybe something that should be, maybe I should think more collectivist about it.
Mhm.
Maybe in this case, I should allow for more individualistic tendencies or individualistic behavior.
Excuse me.
And
Mhm.
it allows us to play better with a wide variety of people around us. And
Yes.
as we, both you and I work with expats, culture shock people is real.
Mhm.
Culture shock is real.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's if you just think it's fun to go to China on assignment for a year, and
Mm.
you have no concept of how, for instance, a collectivist society is different, you're gonna be like a fish on dry land
Mhm.
because it
Mhm.
just doesn't make sense. You have never thought about it, heard about it, and so on.
Yes, I was thinking how sometimes fear drives this kind of push of when you're an individual, individualistic mindset, and you are proposed to go into a collective. I feel that there's a lot of fear. You said it, you were saying it. That's why I laughed, because I was thinking about that, how sometimes not knowing what to expect, makes us reject things that are sometimes a good opportunity, right, to explore. And you know what? I think when I think about when used to be in corporate, secretly, excuse me, secretly, we all wanted to be working as a collective. Why? Because it allowed us to distribute the work, and there was a balance. When you don't work, right, so you have the pros and the cons. When you don't work as a team, as a collective, then you have this disparity where some people get to leave at 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and others have to leave until 8, 9 o'clock because they're working on these projects and all this kind of stuff. But then again, some people that have the collective mindset want to go out and help. But if they've grown up in an individualistic society, they kind of doubt helping their peers, because they think, well, what if he gets all the credit of the work that we are going to do together? Because that really happens. Again, if you're an individualistic society, you're not going to notice that you're doing this. It's the most normal thing for you to say, yay, I did it, versus yay, we did it.
Taking the credit, just like the example earlier with the soccer player, right? It's like who
Mm-hmm.
takes the credit ultimately? And rather than saying, yeah, we all did it together. And true. And so I think this, again, prime leadership example, if you have people that are too strong individualists, they might hinder the coming together of and sharing of the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and and another thing is I think the whole concept also of sometimes saving face, right? Just
Mm.
saving face. Right. I mean, the collective kind of thing. How much do we need to protect? Let's
Mm.
say privacy. How much do we need to collect the brand of the collective, and kind of sing in tune in order to project this unified image? That
Mm-hmm.
also is very much part of it, and I think conflict resolution plays into that.
Mhm.
Very often, I think in individualistic things, you just have the two individuals that maybe are in conflict, and they really go at each other, right?
Mm.
In front of everybody, and you can just voice your opinion because after all it's your opinion and it's valid to be voiced, versus maybe it being much more private, conflict resolution being much more private. If you want to maintain the harmony of the collective, you're going to take this conflict and like talk about it privately, maybe, in order not to disturb the whole harmony of the collective, team, department, family, whatever. And it's also much more common, incidentally, to bring in third party mediators,
Right, right.
collectivist culture groups, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, but let's do it kind of on the down low, and it's not like everybody's always singing kumbaya. That's not what it's about. But it's just like, let's give thought to not make this grow and not make this
Mhm.
conflict the main part of today.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that is also something that I have observed. Yeah.
That's good. Well, I think for me, that's all I have to offer and to say about this. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's going to be more that we're going to touch bases as we develop more into this topic. But for me, that's all that I have to offer. So,
But
what
no, I
do
think
you have more?
this was a good introduction. Interdependence versus independence. Active thought, other-centeredness versus self-centeredness, maybe. And, again, this is not a label. This is not something that you get judged on as being good or bad. It
Right.
is a spectrum. And also, additionally, it is just one of a number of cultural lenses through which you can look at a situation or
Mhm.
behavior and try to make a little bit more of an educated, open, culturally intelligent assessment about it. And, we're going to continue with other ones in subsequent episodes in our cultural intelligence series, because in the end, it's this vast multidimensional space, and we just float around in there. And
Right.
again, stuff is always fluid, but the more you know, the more you know. And the more
Right.
awareness and fine-tuned awareness that you can have as you explore an option. So I hope this was interesting. And actually, I would like to ask our audience if you have interesting examples, maybe of individualism versus collectivism. Share them with us. We would love to hear from you, or just write a comment to these videos, and it would be very nice for you to share this. And if you ever want to come on the show and explain away and have a chat with us, reach out. We are always available to talk to anybody. After all, we are coaches. And about these topics and other topics that we had on the show. Our contact information is in the description of this video. You can find us on LinkedIn. We would really appreciate it if you like this kind of content, to subscribe to the channel, push that notification bell, and otherwise engage with our content. And we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Good job today. Take care, and we will be back next week with much more. Take care. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.